Imagine flying a B-17 during World War II, hundreds of feet in the air with enemy fighters swarming. How do you survive when the odds are stacked against you? Discover the unwritten rules and ingenious tactics devised by B-17 gunners that flipped the script on aerial combat and secured their survival against all odds. 14 October, 1943, Schweinfurt, Bavaria, 8th Air Force B-17 groups, 91st, 92nd, 305th, 306th, 351st, and others versus Luftwaffe fighters JG-3, JG-1, JG-26, and others, commanders, Marge, Genira C, Ika, 8th Air Force. Group leads include Cole Curtis LeMay, 305th Bomb Group, Dawn over Eastern England, Frost on aluminum. Engines cough to life in rolling waves, 4 at a time until the concrete shakes. Crews climb aboard through narrow hatches. Oxygen lines heated, suits, ammo cans, turret checks. The talk is minimal. Everyone knows what Schweinfurt means. Out over the North Sea, the sun finds them. Bright, silver in hard light. The first contrails knit into white ropes. The formation grows wing by wing, group by group, climbing to the assigned altitude stack. The radio keeps it spare. Formation turns. Checklists again. Guns live. They know the odds. Unescorted deep into Germany, the bomber stream has been bleeding since summer. Kiel, Bremen, Regensburg, Augsburg. Loss lists that read like rosters. Gunners feel it in their shoulders, the dull throb where the flak vest rubs the way fear rides in the neck. No fighter cover all the way in. Not today. The P-47 seconds will peel. The P-38 seconds cannot reach every leg. The P-51 seconds are still too few. The first black puffs appear regular as a metronome. Flak bursts stair-step the sky. Shrapnel clatters against skin and spars. The ball turret reports fragments pinging the dome. The radio operator marks the time. The navigator calls drift. The pilot holds the slot steady because the box demands it. Then the contrails come straight at them. Tiny dots that swell into cannon and spinner. Head-on attacks, the hard German approach. Closing speed is savage, too fast for a careful bead. The briefings have hammered it home. They will not give you a calm sight picture. They will rake the cockpit and nose. They will try to break the lead element and peel the box apart. You will not duel. You will deny. The nose gunner does not wait for a perfect aim point. He knows the closure is 600 miles per hour plus. He knows the old range tables are a luxury. He plants his feet, locks his elbows, and starts a disciplined stream. Not blind spray, not panic. A measured wall into the cone of approach. Short timed bursts. Trace the lane, do not chase the dot. The top turret picks it up, stitching through the same lane, offset a hair to build depth. Radio room gun joins. Cheek guns overlap. The ball turret throws an upward rake to fill the gap below. It is not individual marksmanship now. It is geometry. This is the harsh lesson learned in blood. In formation, precision aiming often fails. Closure kills precision. Vibration kills it. Frosted goggles kill it. So the gunners adopt a different truth. Fire early fire, disciplined fire by sector. Overlap arcs. Preempt the attack lane. Make the fighter fly through a volume, not a point. To an outsider, it looks like firing without aiming. Inside the ship, it is doctrine born from experience and drilled on cold gunnery ranges and cold emissions. The formation itself is the weapon. Combat box staggered vertically and laterally, elements nested, so every approach vector meets multiple cones of fire. Lead high, low. Outboard ships guard the edges. Middle ships protect the heart. The trail element is a hinge that refuses to fold. Each gunner owns a slice of sky. Each slice touches another. When the call comes, Bandits 12 high closing, nobody waits to admire a sight picture. They light the lane and hold it steady. The interlocks do the rest. A BF-109 flashes through the nose cones raked by converging. 50 seconds. Bits of cowling shear off. He still fires. A white streak of cannon crosses the nose. The bombardier flinches and stays on the Norden because the lead must hold course. Another W-190 dives from 2 o'clock high rolling to throw off the tracers. The top turret meets him with a hammered cadence, the right waist joins the tail, throws a correction to force him either high into more fire or low into the ball. He chooses wrong. Smoke. He tumbles through and is gone. It is never clean. A chin turret jams, a waist gun frosts over. The tail gunner heated gloves fail, and his fingers go numb around the butterfly trigger. Flak tears rudder fabric on a low ship. Someone yells that the navigator is hit, then revises it. Oxygen mask ripped man is breathing. The pilot checks spacing with tiny brutal corrections. Stay tight. Tight is life. The Luftwaffe keeps coming. Frontal groups break into quartets, then pairs, then single, slashing passes from 5 o'clock low. Rockets in the distance from heavy fighters try to open the box, then cannon to exploit the hole. The hole does not stay open. A replacement ship slides in. The geometry closes again. B-17 gunners do not celebrate. There is no time. When a fighter flames, the tracers shift to the next lane without a word. When a fighter survives and bores straight through, no one swivels to chase the kill. They hold sectors because chasing makes gaps, and gaps get crews killed. Discipline over vanity, pattern over impulse. The formation kills, not the individual. Over the IP, the flak clusters grow thicker. Engines labour, wings flex, the lead ship steadies. The bombardier takes the cue and calls the run. The gunners know what that means. No turns. No evasive weaves. Every gun becomes the moving armour of a straight-line spear. Fire lanes harden. The sky in front of the lead looks like a storm of white yarn as contrails tangle around attacking fighters. The Germans feel it too. That moment when the bomber stream stops being prey and becomes a slow, grinding machine that eats approaches with measured fire. A waist gunner mutters a flat prayer into oxygen hiss. The top turret calls ammo count. The ball asks for 5 degrees more bank to keep a lane filled. The pilot gives him 2.5, just enough. Another frontal pass. The nose gunner is already firing, already on his sector, already trusting the others to build the wall he cannot see. Bombs, soon. But first survive the last 30 seconds of the run. 17 August 1000. 943. Regensburg and Schweinfurt shuttle mission. 8th Air Force B. 17 groups, 4th and 1st. Bombardment wings versus Luftwaffe. Fighters JG-3, JG-27, JG-11, JG-26, and others. Commanders Brig Gen, Robert B. Williams, 1st Wing Cole. Curtis LeMay, 4th Wing, Code SFR. Follow-on doctrine codified in late 1943 through early 1944 by 8th Air Force staff. Bombs arm. The lead commits to straight and level. Every gun becomes armour. What looks like firing without aiming is in fact a map in the mind. Sectors, ranges, closure math. The lesson did not appear in a single flash. It formed across months of losses and after action notes across range towers in Nevada and Texas, across briefings in cold Nissan huts, where gunners compared what worked and what did not. Before England, men learned the weapon by number. Kingman Army Airfield, Harlingen Army Airfield, Las Vegas Army Airfield. Dismantle and reassemble. Identify stoppages by feel. Traverse rates. Lead angles on toe sleeves. Instructors hammered cadence into hands that would be numb at 25000 feet. Short bursts. 5 to 7 rounds. Pause. Correct. Conserve the belt. Hold the lane. The enemy will cross your fire. You will not chase his tail. In England, during the summer of 1943, formations tightened and changed shape. The simple box was not enough. Staggered combat box emerged as practice, then doctrine. Vertical steps. Lateral offsets. Lead element with deputy lead. High and low elements covering arcs the lead could not. The design did two things at once. It stacked bombs for accuracy when the Norden demanded a straight run. It stacked guns so that every approach vector crossed several cones of 50 caliber fire. Colonel Curtis LeMay pushed ruthlessly for standard spacing and discipline in the 305th Bomb Group. Hold position, hold rate of fire, hold lanes. He was not alone. Group and wing leaders across the 8th refined station, keeping signals, ammunition, load plans, and interphone brevity, so that a warning did not drown the ship in noise. The result was not elegant. It was industrial. Interlocking arcs replaced dueling. A fighter pilot facing a lead squadron had to fly through measured volumes of fire that did not care about his name or his individual skill. German attacks adapted. Frontal passes at 12 o'clock high and low, because the cockpit and nose carried the crew that aimed the bombs. Rotte and Schwarm split into scissors to break the box front. Twin-engine Zerstorer with rockets tried to rip a gap from outside effective. 50 range. Gunners answered by moving the first wall farther out. Cheek guns on the nose. Additional flexible mounts in the radio room. Wasteful fire was punished in debriefs. Measured fire was praised. Pattern not spray. Hardware evolved under pressure. Early B-17F crews complained that the nose could be raked before the top turret could bear. Interim fixes added better cheek armament and field mods. The B-17G arrived in late 1943 with the powered chin turret that bit straight into the frontal lane. It was an admission on aluminum. The geometry of defense was now central to survival. Tail and ball continued to stitch the low approaches. Waist gunners learned to avoid crossing streams that blinded each other. The top turret learned to live in the seam between nose and wing. Every position owned a slice that touched a slice. Inside the ship, the mental picture changed. A gunner no longer waited for a clean sight image that would last only a heartbeat at closing speeds above 300 knots. He watched for the line the enemy must cross to reach the bomber. He lit that line early at range with timed bursts, walking the volume and letting closure do the last inches. Sight pictures were still used, but they were now used to confirm that the lane was correct, not to pick a single point on a canopy that would be gone by the time the trigger was pressed. Debriefs cemented the change. Crews annotated diagrams of approach cones. Intelligence officers plotted engagement ranges. Armourers reported belt usage station by station. When one waist gunner burned half a belt chasing a departing fighter, his crew chief found the spent links, and the operations officer found the words, "Hold the sector. If you swing after a departing target, you open a door for the next one. The formation kills, not the man." On the other side of the fight, Luftwaffe accounts noted the shift. Head-on runs that once chewed open a lead box began to cost more airplanes for less effect. Angled approaches had to be bent wider to avoid the chin turret and converging top turret streams. After the second Schweinfurt mission on 14 October 1,943 German units counted victories, but they also counted crews lost piercing walls of fire that were thicker than in August. Interceptors still attacked. They would attack as long as fuel pilots and orders existed. But the calm assumption that a tight box could be snapped with a sharp pass began to slip. None of this removed fear. The human cost did not drop to zero. Gunners still fought frostbite and hypoxia, and the fine tremor that rode inside gloves after an hour of firing in a storm of metal. Yet the rhythm itself was a shield. Interphone calls became short. 2 high, 5 low. 12 level far. The ship did not turn to look. The ship held lanes. The ship stayed in the box. Over the initial point, the idea reached its purest form. The bombardier needed the straight line. The pilot gave it. The gunners made that straight line survivable by building a moving corridor whose walls were stitched by timed bursts. To an observer, it looked like a storm of random tracers. In truth, it was a lattice tied to geometry, range, and closure. When the toggle went and the bombs walked off the racks, the ship was lighter. The turn off the target began. Fighters shifted to stern attacks, riding the slipstream and wake. The same rule stood. Waist-tail, ball-top radio, cheek-chin, sectors, cadence. No hero sights, no chasing glow. The wall holds, the box lives. 20 February, 1944, Central Germany, 8th Air Force heavy bomber formations. B, 17 groups of the 1st, 2nd and 3rd bomb divisions versus Luftwaffe interceptors, JG-1, JG-11, JG-26, JG-300 others. Commanders Lieutenant James H. Doolittle 8th Air Force. Luftflottreich. Commanded by Generaloberster Hans-Jürgen Stumpf. The turn-off target is a knife edge. Every ship that loses the box becomes a singled target. The answer is not art. The answer is layout. Combat box is not a single square. It is a layered lattice. 3-element stacks: lead, high, low. Each element is a 3-ship V. Each V is offset in altitude and laterally so that gun arcs overlap without blinding a neighbor. Distances are measured in ship lengths, not guesses. 30 to 60 seconds before bombs the spacing tightens. After bombs the spacing tightens again to ride out the stern attacks. Every gun position owns a sector. Chin turret owns 12 high to 12 level frontal. Cheek guns cross at oblique front quarters. Top turret owns the seam between nose and wing, then shifts to cover high quarter slashes. Ball turret rakes all low quarters and climbs its fire through the slipstream. Waist guns guard beam lanes and the low tail cone. Tail turret is the hinge and the denial for stern runs. Radio room gun fills an otherwise thin high rear slice. When these arcs are fired in measured bursts, the lanes turn into a moving corridor that a fighter must fly through to reach metal and flesh. Do not chase a canopy. Chase the lane. That is the core. Closure at frontal merge is too high for a perfect bead. Sight pictures lie by looking clean and then vanishing. The discipline is to light the space the attacker must cross at 2 ranges: far range to force him to wobble or break, near range to make the last 2 seconds lethal. The tracers are not random. They are set at known convergence points that the formation geometry forces the attacker to meet. Pilots hold the ship inside the box even when instinct says turn. A turn opens another man to a stern rake. A break destroys another man's lane. So the pilot moves inches, not yards. A fractional bank that feeds the ball turret a better angle. A feathered correction that keeps prop wash from blinding a waist gunner. Tiny moves. Huge effects. In the winter of 1943 to 1944, these rules harden. The B-17G chin turret makes frontal denial credible all by itself, but the formation is what turns credible into punishing. Luftwaffe units that once favored head-on passes now split their runs. 1 pair from 11 o'clock high to pull nose guns. 1 pair from 1 o'clock high to punish the seam. In reply, top and chin coordinate cadence by habit. Chin fires first at longer range to disturb aim. Top holds for a beat, then adds a second wall inside 300 yards. Cheek guns pour a shallow X that catches a rollout. The ball throws a climbing rake to salt the merge. Timing, not speed, is the trick. It looks like a single roar of 50 seconds. It is in fact 3 rhythms braided. The weave is not the fighter weave of escort wings. This weave is bomber body. It is the micro-rocking that changes angles at the edge of a gun's travel without tearing the box apart. A pilot hears the ball ask for 2 degrees more bank to keep a low 5 o'clock lane filled. The pilot gives 1.5 and holds it for 5 seconds. The lane fills. The attacker meets lead that seems to arrive from everywhere at once. Rockets appear. Heavy fighters launch 21 centimeters rockets from outside the easy reach of 50 seconds, then dive in behind the blast. The box answers by refusing to flinch early. If a ship breaks out of fear of the rocket flash, it opens a hole for the cannon run. So the gunners hold cadence through the smoke. If fragments beat against aluminum, the wall still stands. When the heavy fighters commit, the stern sectors are already lit. Tail, high tail by top, low tail by ball. Waists rake the cross. The incoming crew takes hits before they can ride the wake. Gunnery chiefs and armourers on the ground make the air picture possible. Belt loads shift as the winter missions lengthen. More ammunition for nose and top to handle frontal. A known count for waist and tail to ride stern swarms on withdrawal. Heaters are checked twice. Window panes are waxed to delay frost. Oxygen lines are taped to stop flail. These are unglamorous details. Without them, the wall of lead becomes a wall of silence at altitude. Intelligence officers change their boards too. They plot attack headings from gun camera frames and from navigator notes. They notice that Sternhoch and Sternflug attacks change timing when chin turrets are present in numbers. They note that Wild Sow single-engine night fighters pressed into day intercepts will loiter above the box and then slash the rear third. The answer is to harden the rear third with stricter station keeping and a tail-heavy cadence that does not burn belts too early. Luftwaffe pilots record the change in clinical tones. They remark that frontal passes against chin turret ships of lead squadrons are increasingly costly. They describe the phenomenon of meeting crossing streams that make small corrections dangerous. They still claim victories when the box is thinned by flak or weather. They also describe the fatigue of diving into a formation that will not break, where any approach feels like running through bead curtains of fire that cut deeper every 100 meters. The shock is not mystic. The shock is geometric and human at the same time. Inside a B-17, the human part is hard. A waist gunner fights the urge to chase a smoking fighter down and right. He does not swing. He keeps his lane. A tail gunner counts to 3 between bursts because the stream must be solid but not blind. A top turret gunner fights the freeze that comes after a near pass. He breathes once and finds the next lane. The radio operator rotates to his flexible gun for the 3rd time in as many minutes, hands shaking in heated gloves. The pilot does not look back at the fighter he might have downed. He watches the wingtip of the next ship and keeps the distance a hand's width wider or narrower as needed. This is not hero pose. This is industrial rhythm executed by flesh in frost. By the time the formation crosses out over broken cloud toward the North Sea, the defense has done what it is designed to do. It has traded perfect shots for reliable denial. It has turned aiming into area fire by sector. It has punished every approach with enough metal to raise the cost. It has made the Luftwaffe work harder for each loss inflicted. It has given the lead the seconds needed to put bombs on target, and the rest the chance to bring crews home. The wall holds. The box lives. The doctrine tightens another notch. 11. January 1944. Oschersleben, Saxony-Anhalt. 8th Air Force Dread Bomb Division B-17 Groups vs. Luftwaffe Interceptors JG-11 JG-1 JG-26 and others. Commanders Lt. Gen. James H. Doolittle 8th Air Force. Luftflotte Reich, commanded by General Oberst Hans-Jürgen Stumpf. The turn home is a long corridor. Cold, thin air, engines drumming one note. The wall of fire is still there, even with belts parts spent. Everyone feels the weight of what just happened. Not cheering. Not talk. Just the hum and the hiss of oxygen. On the German side, the shift is felt too. The easy belief that a tight head-on pass will crack a box starts to fade. Intercepts still go in hard. But there is a beat of doubt before the merge. A small pause that costs angles. A small pause that saves a B-17. Reports cross desks in both camps. German staff officers read claims and loss lists and see a new pattern. Frontal denial has teeth now. Chin turrets, cheek guns, top turret timing. The cost curve bends upward. Sturmgruppen form to answer the box with armoured for view 190 seconds and close-range attacks. Heavy fighters fire rockets from outside and then dive through the wake. Tactics change because the morale map has changed first. Inside a B-17, the morale map is mapped in frost and breath. -40 degrees. Oil smell in the oxygen. The ache in the jaw from a mask that never quite fits. A ball gunner fights the pinch of a suit that stiffened 10 minutes ago. A tail gunner does finger checks to be sure he can still feel a trigger. The courage is not loud. It is granular. It is the next burst held at the right count. It is the refusal to swing after a smoking target. It is the pilot holding a lane when every rib says turn. Enemy pilots read the wall with their bodies. Tracers draw curtains that do not blink. Crossing streams make small corrections dangerous. A leader rolls to set the line and feels the ship shiver when the first hits walk up the wing. He presses. He still presses. But the idea that the box will break just because he is brave is thinner than it was. He knows the men in that box will not feed his courage with gifts. They will feed it with lead. Crews talk about the sound more than the sight. The sound of a frontal pass that ends in a sudden quiet. The sound of a waist gun that keeps cadence even when the glass frosts and the world is a tunnel. The sound of an interphone that carries only short words that are agreements with a doctrine not panic. 2 high, 5 low, 12 far. Hold lanes. Hold. On the ground, the mind fight continues. Armourers count links and see which stations fired with discipline. Techs add insulation to oxygen lines. Crew chiefs wire heaters so a glove will not die when the airfield is still 50 minutes away. Gunners train in tents with chalkboards that draw the same cone again and again. The wall is learned once on paper, and then again at 25,000 feet. German units answer with mass and armour. Sturmstaffel ideas spread. Close escort to within spitting distance. Rake one ship until it falls out. Then harvest stragglers. It is ugly, and it works when weather and flak thin the stream. But against an intact box it becomes labour. It becomes a grind. Each pass costs machines and men who cannot be replaced at the same rate. The 8th can fill another hard stand with another new crew and another new B-17G with a chin turret. The psychological line is simple. The box looks invulnerable when it is flown right. It is not. Ships still go down. Friends are still lost in smoke and spin. But the look of invulnerability matters because it forces the enemy to plan around a shape that refuses to open on command. The fear moves a few feet from the bombers to the men diving into them. A few feet is enough to change angles. Angles change outcomes. Narrators decades later will argue about how much this mattered compared to escort fighters that range free by spring. Inside the winter of 1943 to 1944, the men who live it know two things at once. Escorts will change the day fight. Until escorts arrive in mass, the only shield is the doctrine they can carry in their hands. Fire by sector, interlock arcs, build the wall. Do not aim for a hero shot. Aim for the lane. There is also the choice to return. Crews come back from Oschersleben with ships scabbed by flak and cannon. They step onto steel stamp feeling into feet and then check their names on a board to see who did not come back. The quiet in the hut is a doctrine too. It says, go again. It says, hold the box tighter next time. It says the wall is not a theory. It is the work. Luftwaffe debriefs record a new tone, even when victories are claimed. Pilots note that head-on runs against lead squadrons with chin turrets are costly. They call for more armoured units. They call for better timing with rocket volleys. They call for weather and cloud and surprise because brute frontal courage alone is no longer enough. A change in spirit becomes a change in staff orders. The B-17 gunners read none of that. They do not need to. They can hear it in the way the next attack hesitates. They can feel it in the slight widen of a dive that buys them one more second. They buy that second with a lane that is already lit. The wall holds. The box lives. The mind fight tilts one more degree. 6 March 1944. Berlin, Germany, 8th Air Force B-17 and B-24. Groups with long-range escorts P-51, P-47, P-38 versus Luftwaffe interceptors JG-11, JG-1, JG-26, JG-300, and others. Commanders Lieutenant James H. Doolittle, 8th Air Force. Luftflotte Reich, commanded by Generaloberst Hans-Jürgen Stumpf. The corridor to Berlin is long, cold, and loud. The box is still there. The wall of fire is still there. Now the escorts roam ahead and to the flanks. They strike assembly points. They break up climbs. They roll with the interceptors. The gunners keep their cadence anyway. Doctrine does not vanish because help has arrived. Doctrine is what keeps ships alive when the sky turns wrong. By March 1944, the B-17G is common in lead positions. Chin turrets bite frontal lanes. Cheek guns cross. Top turrets wait a beat, then add weight near 300 yards. Waist and tail hold the stern on withdrawal. None of this is guesswork. It is the harvest of one hard winter. The idea that looked like firing without aiming has a purpose that can be taught, checked, and flown by crews that met each other only weeks ago on a muddy hardstand. Leadership codifies the lessons. Station-keeping standards are enforced. Ammunition load plans shift by mission profile. Interphone brevity is standard. Debrief forms capture approach headings and effective ranges. Armourers report belt counts by station. Gunnery officers correct waist and reward cadence. The result is not glamour. It is repeatable performance under stress. It is a language any new crew can learn before the next briefing. Luftwaffe adaptations continue. Sturmgruppen press home with armoured Favue 190 seconds at close range. Twin-engine fighters volley rockets, then dive through wakes. Night fighter pilots fly day intercepts from above the stream. Escorts change the geometry by pulling fighters off the boxes. The gunners change little. They hold sectors. They hold rhythm. They do not chase a glow. They let closure walk targets into measured lanes. The mix of escorts and disciplined defensive fire bends the cost curve further. The march to Berlin is still costly. It is no longer the same kind of exposure that defined Schweinfurt. Legacy begins before the war ends. The B-29 arrives with remote turrets, analog, lead computing sites, and a central fire control system. It is a new machine, but the mental map is familiar. Sectors, overlap, cadence, range gates rather than hero beads. Over China in June 1944, and from the Marianas from late 1000, 944 crews learn that a straight bomb run still demands guns that build a corridor the enemy must cross. Colonel Curtis LeMay will later change altitudes and tactics for incendiary night raids over Japan, but the formation defense logic remains a baseline when daylight and altitude are required. The human piece endures beyond the hardware. The discipline to hold a lane rather than swing at a departing target does not change when the gun is directed by a periscope instead of a ring sight. The refusal to break formation for a personal shot does not change when the enemy arrives faster. The core lesson is not romantic. It is industrial and human at once. The formation kills, not the man. The man makes the formation real by doing his job inside frost and noise. After 1945, doctrine migrates across oceans and into another war. Early in Korea, daylight B-29 missions test box defense against jet opponents. MiG-15 speed and climb rewrite the terms, and daylight attacks are curtailed, then moved to night. Yet even in those harsh lessons, the gunnery rhythm persists. Crews fire by sector. They use range gates. They avoid waste. They accept that sometimes the sky has moved beyond the reach of propeller-era defensive geometry. The habit of disciplined fire remains a professional bedrock. There is a quieter legacy. Maintenance shops and armament sections that kept heaters alive and oxygen lines taped became part of the story whether or not anyone wrote their names. Without heat, a trigger finger dies. Without oxygen, a cadence collapses. Without careful belt-handling, guns jam at the merge. The wall of lead is built by men most viewers never see. Their work is not a footnote. It is the difference between sound and silence at 25000 feet. The record also holds another truth. Defensive fire and box geometry did not erase losses. There were days when flak tore openings no wall could fill. There were weather gaps that scattered boxes and made single ships prey. There were formations that held discipline and still paid with metal and lives. The point is narrow and important. The doctrine did not make bombers invulnerable. It made survival possible long enough to complete runs and return more crews than the earlier months had allowed. The men in the gun positions carried that narrow point home. Many did not talk about kills. They talked about lanes. They talked about timing. They talked about the way a top turret would wait a beat so the chin could disturb aim first. They talked about flights where no one knew whose rounds had bent a wing or cut a line, only that the merge felt thicker, and the German came through damaged, late, or not at all. Credit mattered in logbooks. In ships, the only credit that mattered was that the wall had been there again. At museums and air shows decades later, visitors study a B-17 and count gun ports. They ask how anyone could aim all of that in a storm of speed and ice. The quiet answer is that sometimes no one could, and sometimes no one needed to. The guns were not there to win duels. They were there to deny lanes. They were there to build volumes the enemy had to cross. They were there to buy the seconds a bombardier needed and the miles a pilot needed to reach cloud or sea. A last line belongs to the men who endured the winter when escorts were thin. Their work was not loud, it was measured. It was counted in bursts of 5 to 7 rounds in a degree of bank granted to fill a seam in a station that did not swivel for a personal claim when the urge to chase was strong. They were not statues. They were sentinels who learned a hard geometry and held it in their hands. 24 February, 1944. Gotha, Thuringia. 8th Air Force 1st Bomb Division B. 17 groups versus Luftwaffe interceptors. JG-1, JG-11, JG-26, JG 300, and others, Commanders Lotine, James H. Doolittle 8th Air Force. Luftflotte Reich, commanded by Generaloberst Hans-Jürgen Stumpf. Briefing boards at dawn, chalk arcs, arrowheads at 12 high, 2 high, 5 low, 7 high. The room smells of coffee, cold wool, and damp paper. A gunnery officer draws 2 ranges on the board. Far denial. Near kill. He taps the chalk twice on each line. Cadence. Everyone nods. Everyone knows why the chalk matters. On climb out, the crew performs the ritual. Guns charged and safetied. Ammo feeds checked. Sights cleared of frost grease. Heaters tested. Oxygen lines taped where they ride against metal. None of this is decoration. If a glove dies, a trigger finger dies. If a line splits, a gunner fades to grey and then to nothing. The wall is built on small mercies secured on the ground. At altitude, the box firms up into numbers that feel like steel. Lateral spacing measured in ship lengths, vertical steps precise, lead high-low. Deputy lead ready to take the cue if the leader is hit. The pilot holds the slot with fingertip corrections. A half-degree here, a whisper of rudder there. Enough to feed a seam to the ball. Never enough to tear the box. Fighters appear as dots on the white floor of the sky. They climb, assemble, and dive. The radio carries short calls, 2 high, 12 level far, 5 low. The words are not poetry. They are switches that turn on lanes. Chin turret fires first at long range to disturb aim. Cheek guns sow a shallow cross. Top turret waits a beat, then hammers near range. Ball turret rakes up through the slipstream. Waist guns hold their beams. Tail owns stern denial. The streams are separate and yet combined. It sounds like one roar. It is in fact layered math. This is the core truth the winter taught. Precision bead shooting fails at closure speeds that make sight pictures into lies. The answer is not blind spray. The answer is pattern. Timed bursts into a known volume that the attacker must cross. The fighter pilot can be brilliant. The fighter can be fast. He still must pass through a corridor measured and held by men who do not chase his ghost across glass. A 109 comes head-on. The chin turret is already alight. The pilot of the bomber does not throw the ship off the lane. He gives the ball gunner a sliver of bank and holds it for a count of 5. The lane fills. The attacker wobbles as tracers disturb his sight and his nerve. He presses anyway. He feels hits. He is brave. The wall does not care. The wall is built of other men's timing, not of his bravery. A second pass comes from 2 o'clock high. The top turret rides the seam. The right waist takes the beam, but does not cross into the top turret's stream. The tail holds a stern cone for the next threat already forming. The radio room gun fills a thin, high rear slice. No one swings for a personal claim. No one opens a door by chasing smoke. Pattern over impulse. Lane over glow. The formation kills, not the man. Flak changes nothing and everything. Black flowers step the sky. The box rides through because the bombs demand it. The bombardier calls the run. The pilot makes the ship into a rail. No turns, no weave. Every gun is now armor for the straight line. The fighters know this and they come. The gunners answer with the same cold math. Far denial, near kill. 5 to 7 rounds. Pause. Correct. Cadence. The wall becomes most real in the seconds, when the ship is most vulnerable. There are failures. A chin turret jams on a lead ship. The cheek guns take more of the load. A waist pane frosts. The gunner fires by feel and by memory of where his bead would be if he could see it. A tail-heated glove fails. The gunner flexes each finger and counts to stay sure he is still there. A man at a radio gun breathes too fast and almost loses the edges of the world. He hears his name on the interphone. He slows his breathing and finds the lane again. The wall is human. That is why it works. On turn-off target, the escorts carry knives and carve the enemy off the box. The gunners do not relax. Stern attacks still come. Rockets sometimes flash from outside easy range. The worst thing a box can do is flinch too soon. If a ship breaks in fear of the flash, it makes a hole. The cannon run will harvest the hole. So the gunners hold cadence through the smoke. If fragments beat the aluminum, the streams continue. When the heavy fighters commit, the stern lanes are already lit. Debrief after Gotha is another chalkboard and another count of links. The armourer lays down belts by station. The gunnery officer circles excess. He underlines stations that fired with discipline. The navigator marks headings of attacks and range gates where tracers first met. The intelligence officer notes that frontal passes against chin turret ships are less confident. He writes that, as numbers, not as pride, the numbers will become orders for tomorrow. The lesson travels. New crews arrive. They do not need a prophet. They need a checklist, a diagram, and a rhythm. Sectors, overlap, cadence, range gates, hold the box, deny the lane. They take that language into the air within days. The language works because it is simple and because it cares nothing for a single man's aim on a single perfect second. It cares about many men and many seconds arranged so that the enemy must lose something every time he dares to enter. Years later, people will stand under a B-17's wing and ask how anyone could aim all of it. The quiet answer is this. Often they did not aim in the way a rifleman aims. They aimed the air. They aimed time. They aimed lanes and ranges and habits that turned nervous hands into a single machine. It looked like firing without aiming. It was aiming the place where death would have to pass. The corridor home opens over cloud and sea. The interphone is calm, 2 high, 5 low, 12 far. The box breathes. Ships with holes stay in by inches. Ships with men hurt stay in by will. The wall is still there. It will be there again tomorrow because the men who make it are still alive to teach it. The title holds. Why American B-17 gunners started firing without aiming, and how they tore German fighters out of the sky. Not magic. Not myth. Cold math held by warm hands in air that could freeze metal. Geometry, cadence, discipline, and enough faith in the man next to you to hold your lane when everything in you screams to chase.